Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to the Planes, Trains, and Comic Books channel. My name's Matt, and today we're going to review the American Jesus series. But before we get into that, if you guys would mind sharing, subscribing, commenting, it really helps me out and lets me know what you guys want to see more of. So, with that being said, let's get straight into it. All right, we got the cover here for American Jesus Book 1. It is an Image comic, and it is by Mark Millar and Peter Gross. And we start off with this 12-year-old kid named Jody. He's having fun playing with his friends underneath an overpass. And all of a sudden, they hear a noise from above. And it turns out that a dog ran out in front of a semi-truck, and the truck has gone over the side of the bridge and ends up landing directly on top of Jody. But interestingly enough, he is not harmed at all during this accident. He wakes up in the hospital, and he's perfectly fine. There's not a bruise, a scratch, or broken bone on him. And people aren't sure exactly what to call this, but the nurse that is in his hospital room tells him that he is something more than human, that this is just the beginning and that he has powers that will start to manifest in the near future. So when he returns from hospital, he goes back to school after a month or so. And after the first day, one of his teachers calls him to the front and accuses him of cheating on the test that he's taken that day. And this is mainly because before this, Jody was not an A student. In fact, he was more of a D student. But for some reason today, Jody seemed to know all the answers on the test. So the teacher, of course, thinks that this is because Jody has cheated, but when he begins to question Jody from things that weren't even on the test, it becomes clear that something is going on, and Jody does know this information all of a sudden. In fact, it becomes such a spectacle that all the teachers in the school begin to gather around him, and Jody begins to hold court with all these teachers, answering questions that they have about math and science and history. And it's so odd that eventually someone calls his mom and tells her that he's causing a disturbance in the school. So she comes to pick him up, and when they arrive home, she has a one-on-one talk with him and tells him that he, in fact, is special, and that this must remind him of some kind of story that he's read in the Bible. Specifically the time when Jesus was 12 and he was holding court and teaching all the elders in the Jewish community. And this is very much like that because Jody is 12 as well, and all of a sudden he has this knowledge that he has never had before. And then she drops a bomb on him and says that her and his father have never had sex, alluding to the idea that he is the next coming of Jesus Christ. And that's where I'm going to stop it. I don't want to spoil anything else. So that was just a preview of Volume 1 of American Jesus, but I'm actually going to give a review of all 3 volumes. Because I happen to live in Texas, and today there is some bad weather happening, so I stayed home from work, and I picked up Book 1 thinking that I was just going to give it a read, and maybe if I liked it, I would read the other 2 volumes at another time. But this book was so good that I read all 3 volumes in one sitting. I literally couldn't put this book down. Now, this book is written by Mark Millar, who I'm a fan of. I like a lot of his stuff. He did the comic book Wanted and Kick-Ass that were both made into movies. He also did the comic books for The Kingsman that those movies were based on. So he's a very accomplished comic book writer. But this title is an interesting one because this first volume, which is 3 issues, came out in 2004, and then Volume 2 came out in 2020. So there was a 16-year gap between Volumes 1 and 2. And then Volume 3 came out 2 years later, and actually the last issue came out a couple weeks ago, which concludes the whole series. So that's pretty unique for his stuff because he generally tends to write stories that are usually 1 volume. And you might have guessed from the preview that I gave, but this is a book about heaven and hell and the second coming of Jesus and the Antichrist and their battle that is foretold in Revelation. And you might know from this channel, but I'm a big fan of Hellblazer and stuff like that. So I am a sucker for this kind of heaven and hell, big epic battles. But I thought Mark Millar was going to do more of a by-the-numbers story, more like a summer blockbuster movie. But this was not that. This had so much more depth than anything I've read from him before. And it really seemed like he treated the subject material with reverence while also calling out things within the religion that might seem hypocritical or obviously not possible. And I think that because Millar cares about this subject matter so much, this story carries more weight than some of his other comics do. Over the other 2 volumes, The New Messiah and Revelation, we of course see the rise of the Antichrist and the second coming of the new Messiah, all culminating in the final battle in Revelation. It is not a typical ending that you could see coming, but it wraps up so nicely and very beautifully, and I definitely think that this is Millar's best work so far. The art over the 3 volumes, even though there's a large span of time in between, is very consistent, and they're all done by the same person, and even though Peter Gross switched from physical to digital art in between volumes 1 and 2, it doesn't really change the feel or the look of it throughout. So in researching this, I also found out that this is supposed to be a Netflix show in the next year or so. It has a different name, but it is based on this comic series. And now that I've read this, I can't wait to see what they do with the TV show. If they keep a similar storyline with the ending that this book has, it should be freaking awesome. So this series was so good, I think everybody should read it. But of course, if you're not a fan of religious stuff or heaven and hell kind of stories that are heavily based on biblical stuff, this one's probably not going to be for you. And also, it might be a little hard for someone who is very, very religious, because some of the things that happened in this book are extremely shocking and very messed up, because we are talking about the end of days and the rise of the Antichrist. But it is all worth it for the amazing ending, and I can't recommend this book highly enough. So of course, I'm going to give this series a 5 out of 5. I highly recommend you read all 3 in one sitting, because they pay off immensely if you do. And I really hope that this comes out in one big hardcover collection, because I need that on my shelf. So please, for the love of God, Mark Millar, make that happen. So if you guys saw anything you like, definitely go pick those up at your local comic book store, and we will see y'all in the next one.